He lived where the land almost surrendered to the sea, in a weathered house perched on a cliff that smelled of salt. Old wood and solitude, a place chosen not for beauty but for distance, because distance had become his closest companion after years of learning how to exist without being noticed. The ocean was the only thing that spoke to him consistently, its moods changing like a living soul, sometimes calm and inviting, sometimes violent and unforgiving, yet always honest, always present. And he found comfort in that reliability. Every morning he woke to the sound of waves crashing against rock. Every evening he watched the sun dissolve into water like a quiet ending he never quite reached. And in between, he lived a life defined by routine and absence, carrying a loneliness that was not loud but persistent, the kind that settles into your bones and becomes part of how you breathe. He had not always been alone, that the world he once shared with others felt distant now, like a story he remembered but no longer belonged to. And so he poured what remained of himself into the sea, talking to it as if it could listen, as if it understood the weight of being unseen. One evening, as twilight painted the horizon in bruised purples and gold, he noticed something different in the water, a movement too deliberate to be waves, too fluid to be driftwood, and he stood frozen, heart pounding not with fear, but with a strange recognition he could not explain. The ocean parted briefly, revealing a figure just beneath the surface, catching the dying light in a way that made his breath stop. And for a moment he wondered if loneliness had finally bent his mind into imagining what it needed most. But then she surfaced slowly, cautiously, as if the sea itself were presenting her, and everything he believed about the world shifted in that instant. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Not ethereal in a fragile way, but powerful, grounded, real. Her presence commanding the water around her, her eyes reflecting the sky as if they belonged to both worlds at once. He did not move, afraid that any sound would break whatever fragile boundary allowed her to exist in front of him. And she watched him with a curiosity that mirrored his own. Neither startled nor afraid, simply aware. There was something profoundly intimate in that first exchange of silence. A shared stillness where two beings from different realities acknowledged each other without words. And in that moment, he felt less alone than he had in years. He did not know how long they remained there, the air heavy with unspoken questions, the sea breathing around her, the wind brushing against his skin. But when she finally slipped back beneath the surface, leaving only ripples behind, he felt an ache sharper than any loneliness he had known before. That night he could not sleep, replaying the image of her in his mind, the way she had looked at him, not as a curiosity or a threat, but as something familiar. And he wondered if love could be born not from touch or conversation, but from recognition alone. In the days that followed, he returned to the edge of a cliff at the same hour, telling himself it was coincidence, that he was only watching the sea as he always had. Yet his heart betrayed him every time the water shifted, every time light danced across the surface. When she appeared again, closer this time, her presence felt less like a miracle and more like an inevitability, as if the sea had been slowly guiding them toward each other all along. And as their silent encounters became routine, something within him began to soften, opening in a way he had long believed impossible. He did not yet know her name, her voice, or the limits of what separated them. But he knew with a certainty that frightened and thrilled him that the sea no longer felt empty, that his solitude had been interrupted not by noise or demand, but by a connection that felt ancient, patient, and quietly consuming. And as he stood there night after night, falling in love with a being he could not touch, could not fully understand, he sensed that his life, once defined by isolation, was drifting towards something far more dangerous and beautiful than loneliness, hope. If you like this story, please take a second and subscribe. This will motivate us to bring more stories for you. As the days stretched into weeks, their meetings took on a rhythm as natural as the tide itself. A quiet agreement formed without words, without promises, yet felt with an intensity that unsettled him in ways both terrifying and exhilarating. Because for the first time in years, he was no longer merely waiting for time to pass. He was anticipating something. She began to surface closer to the rocks now, her movements less cautious, her gaze lingering on him with a curiosity that felt personal, intentional, and he found himself speaking to her despite not knowing if she could understand. His voice carried away by the wind and the surf, telling her about the small details of his life, about the loneliness that had shaped him, about the way the sea had become both refuge and prison. She listened in her own way, eyes attentive, expression subtle but unmistakably responsive, and sometimes she would tilt her head or let a soft, melodic sound escape her lips, something between a hum and a breath, as if language itself took a different form beneath the waves. There was an intimacy in those moments that surpassed anything he had known before, not driven by touch but by presence, by the vulnerability of being seen by someone who owed him nothing yet stayed. He began to notice details about her that haunted him long after she disappeared beneath the surface. The way light refracted across her skin like moving constellations, the strength and grace in her posture, the contrast between her otherworldly form and the very human emotion in her eyes. Desire crept into his awareness slowly, not as something urgent or consuming, but as a quiet warmth that settled in his chest, a longing shaped more by emotional connection than physical imagination, because what drew him to her was not what she was, but how she made him feel whole in a way he had forgotten was possible. There were moments when she would lift herself higher from the water, resting against the rocks just enough for him to see the curve of her shoulders, the subtle tension in her muscles as she balanced between sea and shore. And in those moments, his breath would catch, not with hunger, but with awe, with a reverence that bordered on devotion. He never reached for her, never tested the boundary between them, sensing instinctively that respect was the fragile bridge holding their connection together. And she seemed to understand this, rewarding his restraint with trust, with closeness, with longer stays. One evening, as the sky darkened and the sea reflected 1,000 broken stars, she did something that changed everything. She reached out, her fingers brushing the surface of the water near the rock where he stood, close enough that he could see the delicate webbing between them, close enough that the distance between their worlds felt suddenly unbearable. His heart pounded as he lowered himself slowly, carefully, until he was closer to her level, the air thick with anticipation and fear. And when their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that this connection was no longer innocent, no longer accidental. In that suspended moment, he understood that he had fallen in love not with a fantasy, not with a creature of myth, but with a soul that mirrored his own longing, his own isolation, his own quiet hope for connection. And when she withdrew again, slipping back into the water with a final look that lingered like a promise, he remained there long after she was gone, aware that his heart was no longer anchored solely to land, that something within him had begun to drift toward the sea, toward a love that defied reason, logic, and safety, and that whatever awaited him next would demand a choice he was not yet ready to name, but already felt forming in the depths of his being. I hope you have subscribed. If not, please take a moment and subscribe. From that night onward, the sea no longer felt like a boundary, but a living presence that followed him everywhere, whispering her absence into every quiet moment of his day. And he began to notice how deeply she had woven herself into his existence, how even the simplest routines carried her imprint, the echo of her gaze. The memory of her voice that was not quite sound, but something softer, older, like a feeling given breath. He returned to the rocks every evening without fail, sometimes waiting for hours while the sky shifted through its moods, anxiety and hope coiling together in his chest, until at last she emerged again, closer each time, more certain, as if she too had been counting the hours beneath the waves. Their bond deepened in ways neither of them could fully understand, shaped by shared silence as much as whispered confessions. And he found himself learning her rhythms, the way she moved when she was joyful, the subtle tension in her posture when something troubled her, the moments when she lingered as if she wished she could stay longer, but was held back by forces he could not see. One night, as the tide rose higher than usual and the wind carried a restless edge, she revealed something that shifted the fragile balance between them through gestures, expressions, and fragments of sound. She showed him visions of her world beneath the surface, not in images alone, but in emotion, allowing him to feel the weight of water, the vastness of the deep, the loneliness that mirrored his own in a way that left him breathless. He understood then that her existence was not a fairy tale, but a life bound by rules as unforgiving as gravity, that she belonged to a realm that could not easily accommodate him, just as his world could never truly accept her. The realization did not weaken his love. It sharpened it, giving it an edge of urgency and sorrow. Because love, he was learning, was not always about possession or permanence, but about recognition, about choosing to care even when the cost was inevitable loss. There were moments when their closeness felt almost unbearable, when she hovered so near that he could feel the cool mist of her presence on his skin, when his instinct was to reach out, to bridge the final distance. Yet something in her eyes always stopped him, a warning wrapped in tenderness. And still, she trusted him enough to show her vulnerability, to let him see the sadness she carried, the longing to experience the world above the surface, not as an observer, but as a participant, to feel the warmth of the sun without pain, to walk without fear of suffocation or discovery. He began to dream of impossible solutions, of ways to exist between worlds, of sacrifices he might make without fully understanding their consequences. Because love had a way of making the unimaginable feel necessary. The sea, once his solace, now became a source of conflict. Its beauty laced with danger, its depth filled with questions that had no simple answers. And as their connection intensified, so did the sense that something had to change. One evening, as a storm gathered on the horizon and the waves grew restless, she lingered longer than ever before, her expression a mixture of resolve and fear. And in that charged stillness, he sensed that a turning point was approaching, that their story could not remain suspended forever between glances and half-spoken truths, and that whatever choice awaited them would demand more courage than either of them had ever known. Because loving her meant standing at the edge of everything he understood and deciding whether to step forward into the unknown or retreat back into a life that would never again feel complete without her. The storm broke as if summoned by the weight of that unspoken decision, thunder rolling across the sky while the sea surged against the rocks with a ferocity that mirrored the turmoil inside him. And she rose from the water one final time that night with an urgency he had never seen before, her presence trembling between courage and farewell, her eyes reflecting lightning and something deeper, something like grief. In that moment, without words, she showed him the truth she had been shielding him from. Her kind could not remain near the surface for long without consequence, and each visit to him weakened her bond to the sea that sustained her, yet staying. Away toward her in a different way, because love, once awakened, did not fade quietly back into silence. He felt the realization strike him with a cruel clarity that every meeting had been a choice, every shared moment a sacrifice she had made willingly, and the knowledge filled him with a reverence so profound it hurt to breathe. As rain lashed against his skin and the wind screamed around them, he finally reached out, not to pull her closer, but to rest his hand at the edge of the water, offering connection without demand. And when she placed her hand there too, the contact was brief, but electric, a promise and a goodbye woven into a single heartbeat. She showed him a final vision then, not of her world or his, but of a future shaped by memory rather than presence. Of him standing by the sea with a quiet strength born from having loved something extraordinary. Of her swimming the endless depths, carrying the warmth of his existence like a hidden flame. Tears mixed with rain on his face as he understood that love did not always mean staying. That sometimes it meant letting go without bitterness, honoring what was shared by allowing it to remain pure. Slowly, reluctantly, she withdrew her form, dissolving back into the dark water as the storm reached its peak, and though he called out her name, the sea answered only with the crash of waves and the steady rhythm of its ancient breath. When dawn finally arrived, pale and gentle after the violence of the night, he stood alone on the shore, changed in ways no one else could see, carrying a love that no longer demanded proof or proximity, only remembrance. The sea returned to its familiar calm, yet it was never empty again, because within its vastness lived the knowledge that somewhere beneath the surface, a mermaid carried the echo of a lonely man who had loved her without trying to own her, and within his heart lived the certainty that even the briefest connection could shape an entire lifetime, that love, like the ocean, did not need to be held to be real, only felt, honored, and allowed to exist in its own boundless way. If you want to listen to more romantic stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We work really hard to bring these stories to you, so your likes truly matter. Feel free to share your own stories in the comments below. We look forward to that.